We're going to continue by looking at two scriptures right in a row here. They're scriptures about the same man, but they're from two very different parts of the Bible. And the man is Moses. Maybe you know the account of Moses, maybe you don't. He was born an ancient Israelite, but he actually grew up in Pharaoh's household. Pharaoh was the grand leader of Egypt. And Moses got a great education. He had a lot of power, a lot of prestige. He was a great leader. And then he chose to give it all up, and he moved to the desert for 40 years. And then God called him back, and he became the leader of Israel, and he led the people out of Egypt, through the desert, right up to the promised land, back into their home nation of Israel. The first section we're going to look at here is from the book of Numbers, chapter 12. And in this section, Moses is called the most humble person in the world. And the really interesting part is that Moses is the one who wrote these words down. They're God's words, but they're written through Moses. And he himself says, yeah, I'm the most humble person in the world. Give them a listen. Miriam and Aaron began to talk against Moses because of his Cushite wife, for he had married a Cushite, and Miriam and Aaron are Moses' siblings. Has the Lord spoken only through Moses, they asked? Hasn't he also spoken through us? And the Lord heard this. Now, Moses was a very humble man, more humble than anyone else on the face of the earth. At once, the Lord said to Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, "Come out to the tent of meeting, all three of you." So the three of them went out. Then the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud. He stood at the entrance to the tent and summoned Aaron and Miriam. When the two of them stepped forward, he said, "Listen to my words. When there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, reveal myself to them in visions. I speak to them in dreams. But this is not true of my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him I speak face to face, clearly and not in riddles. He sees the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?" This is God's word. Now that section from Numbers there, the Lord speaks about the fact that Moses is so great. And the next section we look at, Hebrews 11, it also speaks about how Moses was so great. And it tells us how. It tells us about the great faith that Moses had. And yet, this faith was completely humble. Because Moses knew that he was only what God made him. He was willing to be the leader of the people because that's what God called him to be. He wasn't thinking about himself. He was thinking about God and what God said, and about God's people and what they needed. Listen to these words from Hebrews chapter 11. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He left, in other words, living in Pharaoh's household. He went to be an Israelite after he went out to live in the desert for 40 years. Verse 26, he regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. In other words, he saw God. By faith he kept the Passover and the application of blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. This is the humble faith that God blessed Moses with. This is also God's word. Go ahead and give our next song a listen.